Well, this is it. This is the time you're always waiting for. It is Wednesday. It is 4 o'clock. And this is Viking Stew. We're back with Hammer Away. That's what this is. And you can see today, we're going to be rocking with Corky Gunn of Sweet Pain. We got a few things we were just chatting about that we will be chatting about today. So without any further delay, Corky Gunn, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm fantastic. I've been looking forward to this, as I do all of the discussions, because there's just so many ways to come about music, and music affects us all in different ways, and there's always something funny that comes out of this show. There's always great stories, great war stories. I'm sure that you've got at least 10, right?
Oh yeah, there's lots of stories, man. I mean, it's I lived a very colorful life.
Coming with the first thing we'll make sure that we jump onto, and I'll show this here real quick. Here is you have a re-release of your album from '85. It's now on CD. It's been out of print for quite a few years, you've said, right?
It's been out of print for, I don't know, maybe late 80s it went out of print. I mean, it was a very small release, Combat Records, which was known as a thrash label. I mean,
right.
So we were not what they normally did. I think they must have pressed, I don't know, 5,000 copies, maybe. Wow. But it was it was vinyl and cassette.
Okay.
And at the time, I mean, the CDs were just starting to happen in mid 80s, but it never made it to CD until now.
Wow. And then there's the cassette version from all those years ago.
Yes, that's
and I do want to ask you, there's the regular cover right there from the vinyl. The thing I do want to ask you straight away is I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought on it. The first thing I wanted to ask you was about putting this album together, because it is a different thing for Combat. In fact, I read a small article that was a gentleman, I don't know if you've read this one. It was somebody talking about a friend who had this record. They went over to their house and listened to it and was like, oh, well, okay, I get it. But this is on Combat. How is this style of music on Combat?
Yeah, so the story there is, Combat, there's two labels, Combat and Relativity, which both came from the distributor, which was called IRD, Important Record Distributors. They started out as an import record distributor, late 70s, importing European records, selling them to stores in America. So they got very, very big and very powerful, and they started their own labels. They also distributed, and it was P&D deals, press and distribute. They did deals with Megaforce and Metallica, the first couple Metallica records. They did stuff with Metal Blade, and then they released, Megadeth and Possessed and Exodus. So I worked at that company from the very beginning days, and the owner, who I was tight with, said, hey, we need a glam band. And at the time, all the bands on the West Coast were signed, everybody, Motley, Rat, Poison, all that stuff was signed. And there was not the next wave yet. There was no Guns N' Roses and Faster Pussycat and all that yet. So, And in New York, there weren't many bands. There were bands that were kind of like that junky Johnny Thunders kind of scene, which they didn't want to deal with junky bands. So he said to me, you should just start a band. I said, well, he knew I was into the scene, and I knew all the guys in Rat and Motley Crue and all the stuff. He's like, everybody, you should just start a band. I said, well, I've never been in a band. I don't know. What am I supposed to do? He goes, well, you just be the singer. So it kind of happened like that. And they just wanted a piece of that market, the glam market. And at the time, they were doing incredible business, and they were pressing so many records. So for them, it was not a big deal to press 5,000 copies of something. It was done very quickly, very cheaply. So the first guy I got into the band was Kelly Nichols, who went on to be the bass player in LA Guns. He was a friend of mine from New York. He was a roadie in a cover band on Long Island. He was the roadie, and me and him were tight friends, and I got him in, and he was just learning how to play the bass kind of. And then we just put it together, and we recorded it and pressed it. It came out. It just happened really quickly.
Wow.
That's pretty much the story there. It was never meant to be serious.
here's the photo of the band.
That's the original 5-piece band.
Okay.
Then the band became a 4-piece.
Is that indicative of that then?
Yes, this is the 4-piece that was whose picture is on the album cover.
Gotcha. There you go.
Right. So the 5th member was let go right after the record was recorded.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because it was it's, you get out there and you start doing, as we find out about these bands. I was just talking to a gentleman today. There's a great record store here that I'll be talking about a little bit in another thing called Joe's Records. And I was down there chatting with him about it and talking about how it's interesting when you learn about bands that were around when I've had a metal brain for years and a metal heart, and I love it. And yet there's still bands that I'm finding out about that I'm like, how did I not know about these guys? And here you go.
Yeah, it was, we had press and, coverage in magazines and we had good, because the label came from a distributor. They had the distribution locked. So they were very adept at getting the word out to the stores and getting the product flowing. They had the distributorship down. That's what gave them the power. They got the record out there while it was new. They got it out there, but it was, everyone was very confused. Why is Combat Records doing this glam band or whatever? but I mean, the band was like, I always said Sweet Pain was Kiss meets the Sex Pistols. So it was very raw and it wasn't polished, and it was, we didn't want to sound like, I don't know, whatever was big then, Ingve Malmsteen or whatever. We didn't want to be that. We wanted to be more punky, but with like a Kiss edge. And that wasn't really cool in mid 80s. People weren't into punk rock in 1984.
It was for me. That's what's always so interesting. Yes, market wise, no. Me wise, abso-frickin-lutely. That's why I gravitated to this stuff and I loved it.
Well, the punk became, and by the mid 80s, punk had become hardcore, and there was no more punk rock. Punk rock was mellow compared to the the Cro-Mags and Agnostic Front and all those bands.
Right.
So, that's what punk became, was hardcore, and I was was not into that scene. I saw the Sex Pistols in '78 in Atlanta when they first came over. So I was a punk guy: Clash, Pistols, Dead Boys, Ramones, but I was not into the whole hardcore thing. Which that was a big scene. I mean, in New York, hardcore was huge. And then you had the British stuff, GBH and, but we were more like Sex Pistols kind of meets Kiss. And it was not what people were into at the time.
Right.
It was just what it was. I mean, that's what we were. So, it's a piece of history that if you're into that scene, Kelly Nichols came out of that band, and the drummer in Sweet Pain went on to be in a band called the Throbs, who had an album on Geffen. So it was a thing for a minute, and then it went away. But it's amazing how people still have a hunger to find this record, or I've seen it on eBay for, I don't know, $50, so it's just like, it's weird to me.
I can imagine, which makes it great that it's coming back on a CD release as well. Now, will there be any sort of a new vinyl release as well?
I believe they're going to press some vinyl. I know the plan is to press it on pink vinyl, and I don't know what the time frame is on it. The CD. So just give you a quick breakdown on the tracks and everything. The original CD. The original vinyl album came out, and then the cassette had an extra song on it.
Okay.
Right. So on this re-release, I have the original master tapes. I was given the tapes and the rights to the thing, and I remixed this back in the 90s.
Oh.
I remixed the whole thing. So
where did you do that?
I did it at a little studio on Long Island.
Okay.
And then I mastered it. And I think maybe my friend Bruno Ravel, who was a high school friend of mine who ended up in Danger.
Oh yeah.
He mixed it. I don't know if he mixed it or mastered it. It's so long ago, but he was involved in the project. So what you have is the original album tracks. You have the extra song from the cassette. There's an extra track that never made anything that was left off of the record, cover of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, the Elton John song. And then there's 4 live tracks from the core 4-member band, and then there's some radio interviews. So it got beefed up with all this extra stuff. So if you have the vinyl or cassette, this has got extra stuff on it.
Right. Well, that's outstanding. I think it's I think those things are great. It's always good these days because things get a little, sometimes obviously they're a little more expensive right now. Inflation's way out the ass, but it's good to get a lot more bang for your buck, instead of like, I bit the bullet recently. I've been into Burning Witches, and I bit the bullet and bought an import with two extra songs on it and paid about $10 more. And I'm like, yeah. So,
that's what being a fan is. I mean, in the record distributor days, when we were bringing in import records from Britain, the British stuff always had extra tracks and the B-side was different. And so the import boom was very, very hot because the British stuff had extra songs or things that weren't available in America. Like I just thought of the Wasp, the first Wasp 12-inch of Fuck Like a Beast.
Yep.
Not available in America. It was only available in Britain. And they sold, I can't tell you how many thousands of that 12-inch from Europe because it wasn't available here. Those days are long gone. For the most part, you can find anything online now, so but that was the thing. If you're a fan, you collect stuff. That's what makes it fun.
Right. And that's kind of like the certain vinyl back in the day, like Ozzy's, like Blizzard of Oz had 2 different covers.
Yes. Yes. I was working at the record distributor in 79 when that first Blizzard of Oz record came in from Britain. They didn't even have an American release yet. That's the other thing. A record would come out in England, like the Ozzy record. Yeah. And by the time it was pressed in America, it'd be like 4, 5, 6 months. So the imports were sold like crazy, but yes, it had a different cover. But in those days, they always said, I mean, that was if you were an audiophile, German pressings were the best vinyl you could get, followed by the British pressings. American pressings always were looked at as being crappy because they just pressed it on whatever, recycled vinyl. But the German and the British vinyl was like, I think virgin vinyl. You always had a better sound from the European release.
Very interesting. I think about that now too, like, especially when I ask you, will it be released on vinyl? And you mentioned, there's been a little talk about a pink vinyl thing. And, there's been a couple of reviews. I'm not sitting here going, oh, I watch these videos and it's perfect. It's a perfect example of, I listen to everything they say and it all makes sense. That's not the point, but it's about whether or not and some of these guys they've been going through vinyl for years, and they're saying some of these pressings are not good. Have you heard that happening at all?
Yeah, well, the new stuff.
Yeah,
because I've heard that because there's a vinyl shortage. Anytime anything is hot, a shortage, I should say, in the actual plastic. Right. Anytime anything is hot, I don't care what it is, the prices go up. So vinyl got hot, the prices went up, it cost more to press it. So people started going, well, we don't need virgin vinyl. We can use this recycled stuff and it's half the price. And that's what they do. So, and you don't get a good sound out of that. But it also depends really what you're playing it on. I mean, some people play it on little plastic.
You're absolutely right.
I'm a vintage guy. I've got old 70s turntables and stuff. So that's how it's supposed to be listened to on analog, everything analog.
Yes.
Records are not supposed to be listened to anything digital. So it also, what you're listening to it on affects it. But yeah, you can chintz out and, and use crappy material. I mean, I can't believe what some of the records cost today. A new vinyl record,
Dude,
it's like crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I let's just take, for example, that when Symphony X was here in town, I really wanted to get it. And I almost ordered it online, but it was almost, and I don't want to downplay anything. These guys, I love Symphony X. I got, I love the band. I love the guys. They're great. Has nothing to do with that. I don't know, just the prices. I wanted to get something, but it was like $50.
It's crazy.
And I'm like, and it's the same way, with the show, with something like this, it gets tough. And you're like, I can't afford to buy everything. I'm not making money at this. It's just, it's something you're building. It's for the future. It's not about now, and you're like, I can't be buying everything if it's going to be like $50 per something to hear.
Yeah. I rarely buy anything new. If I get vinyl, it's always old stuff.
Yeah.
But I have a wide taste of music. I listen to everything from, rock to jazz to country to dance music. I listen to all kinds of stuff. So, but you pull out an old jazz record on Blue Note from the 50s or 60s, man, that's nothing sounds better than those records.
Yeah.
It's because the grooves aren't crowded with noise.
Yes.
There's space in there. So, but everybody's different. Some people are just metal fans or whatever, and God bless. It's like, but yeah, the prices of the records are just insane. Even old records. It's what used to be what I would call a $5 record, now like a $50 record. It's
right.
Everything's just through the roof. It's but again, the market drives that.
Yeah, even used, as you well know too, it's just gets nuts, which may be what you were alluding to there as well.
Yeah, used stuff.
God, I mean, and it's in shit condition. I'm like, I'm looking at the cover going, the side is blown out, and where people just shoved a record into it, and it kept bumping the edge and blown out the edge. I had a Bon Jovi one. I finally just said the hell with it, and I bought a new one, that had been reprinted recently.
Yeah,
I had 7,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and it disappeared. I don't know where it went, and it was a promo copy that I'd gotten from a radio station back in 1986 when I went in to enter a Judas Priest concert, and a contest that they were having, and they had me pick out a record. There it was. Well, then I go out because it's been missing. I find one for $20 with the spine blown out. I'm like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. Who the hell would buy this thing?
Yeah, people, a lot of people don't really know either. I mean, I've been buying records since, I was born in 1960. So I've been buying records for a long time. Most people don't really know. I mean, I find that, I live in an area that's very remote, so there's really not a lot of stores around me anyway. But the last couple of years, I buy everything offline on eBay or whatever.
Discogs is great too, right?
Yeah, I mean, Discogs is good. You can get screwed on Discogs sometimes because they don't have an actual picture of the actual record. But I have found dealers that are reputable. And if I want something, I'll get it offline from somebody, and I know, fair price. Anybody that's charging, big money for something with a blown out cover they're just looking to just, take advantage of people.
Right. Because I'm like, where did you find that price? Because it sure as hell wouldn't be for this piece of shit.
No. It's pretty crazy with some records, like anything Motley Crue is, through the roof.
Yeah. Any of those. It is very interesting what is expensive and what's not. Oddly enough, I keep finding, like, I just gifted this album today to someone at the record store that I was talking about, because I love this record so much.
Oh yeah.
Most
people don't know who that is.
What a brilliant record of guys from Mott the Hoople.
Yeah.
And I just told him, I said, I buy a copy every time I see it, if the price is right. And it normally is, because it's one fantastic record that nobody knows about, but it's never too expensive. It's $8 or less.
Motley, you couldn't give a Motley Crue record away, 10, 15 years ago. But now, since the movie and everything else,
Yes.
everything Motley Crue has gone through the roof. Whereas, something like the British Lions, which is a great record, there's no demand, so the price is low.
Exactly. And
Which
fortunately,
is
it's that way
weird.
for other great ones. 707's Megaforce is the same way.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I bought it sealed the other day for
Oh, wow.
for about $8.
That's very fair.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's, see, there you go, Corky. That's it exactly. I'm looking at it going, that is fair. I will do that.
Fair.
But
stores, I had my owned a retail record store for a while back in the early 2000s.
What was the name of it?
Control Music.
Cool.
It was in New York, but it's tough to make a living, So when a store knows they're going to get top dollar, they can get $100 for a Shout at the Devil in good, decent condition. They're going to do it because you got to make money. If people were going to pay $100 for British Lions, it would be $100. So it's tough. It's tough. The margins on retail stores are very small. It's tough to make a living. But most guys are in that business because they love it.
Maybe unconsciously, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I buy it cheap every time, and I push it on this show all the time. Maybe one day I'll get it up to a big price.
Yeah. You never know, man. I mean, there's so, and listen, I listen to all kinds of stuff, but I find every day almost something I've never heard before or
Thank you.
I overlooked. And that's the beauty of music. It's, if you care about music, there's always something to discover.
Yeah.
People, there's nothing happening. Look, I don't think anything's happening today, but you can certainly go backwards. And there's so much that, like I said, I have never even didn't know about, that I found out about, something from the 30s or the 40s or the 50s that I went over my head, or I was too young. And then you kind of like, you search it out.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it all. It's the deep dive into music, man. If you care about music, there's always something to find.
Yeah. And especially how we look back, like I work for a special needs high school. So a lot of times we watch some things that are a little younger than an actual high school student would check out, because they, sometimes it's not as, they like the simpler, more kid things, some of these guys. Mm-hmm. And so there's a gentleman out there who does a couple of his things. He's used a Green Day track, and then he used the Ronson track that, with Bruno Mars, and so when I'm listening to that, I'm like, holy crap, I never realized it, but listening to it, that's the Time and Prince put together in that chorus part of Uptown Funk. That's the Time and Prince. It's just a mashup of that. And so when you say that, I'm like, we noticed things that were way back when, and we're like, holy crap, they totally like use that here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's no shortage of old stuff, man. I mean,
there's no.
I always find something. I get on kicks. I'm on whatever I've been listening to lately. Whatever. I get on a little thing and I follow that as far as I can take it, and then I'll find another little path of music, and you just go, man.
Absolutely.
I use Spotify a lot just because it's I'm not, listen, it is what it is, but for the price you pay every month, you pretty much have access to everything. So, I do a lot of reading. So I'll read about it, something, I'll be like, oh, wow, I never heard this. And I'll find it on Spotify 9 out of 10 times. Sometimes there's things that are just not on there. But for the most part, you can find a lot of catalog on there.
Yeah. The interesting thing is if you get on there right now and you check out Sweet Pain, you find the band from 68, right?
Yeah. Well, there's so many different bands called Sweet Pain now. There's like a Japanese thing. There's about, I don't know, probably
there's a single dude that's a Sweet Pain thing.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I found that would be, and I'm not even saying music style wise, but I mean, I'm just saying, here's a band called Sweet Pain. And is that band from '68. They released that album.
Yeah, the rock
And,
band Sweet Pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, they it's funny when Sweet Pain, my version started, we didn't even know about that band. Like no one had heard of them. You know, they weren't popular. They weren't big. I think they maybe put out one record.
I think that's it.
So we didn't like, oh, no one even thought about it. They were just sitting around trying to think of a name, and everybody was, you know, into Kiss, and that's where the Sweet Pain came from, was the Kiss.
Yeah, I'll put that up here on the screen. You can see it right there.
Right. That's where it came from that album. So yeah, but we didn't know about the other Sweet Pain until much later. I don't know when it was, probably maybe late 80s or so.
Mm-hmm.
I stumbled upon that album you're talking about on an 8-track. And I was
like, yeah.
Wow, there's another band called Sweet Pain. Never heard of it. But there was no internet back then. So you couldn't Google, you couldn't search. It was like, you know, which made it really, for me, that was the best times when you didn't have everything at your fingertips. You had to actually work to find information. But yeah, so we didn't know about Sweet Pain, that original '68 Sweet Pain.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is funny.
It's also weird to think how now that was almost almost a 20-year difference in your band and that band.
Yeah.
But closer was Asia. There was another Asia band right before Asia started. So
really? I never knew that.
And it's pretty good. They had a couple, maybe a few records before they went away. But yeah, there was another Asia right before Asia. I was like, this is kind of trippy. But yeah, check it out. It's pretty good. Well, there you go. See, there's another band to check out.
There you go. Never heard of it.
It never ends. Thank God it never ends. Thank God.
Absolutely.
But you know, thank you for mentioning that too, Corky. I'm really glad you said that, because I'm the guy who's like, well, there's stuff out there like it used to be. It's just the corporations aren't going to tell you about it, and you're going to have to find it yourself. The radio stations aren't going to play it. But also, that's a perfect point to say you don't always have to keep looking now. Just go back and check out stuff that was a long time ago, and you're going to find something that's in that realm that was happening at the time that you had no clue was going on.
There's, I mean, for somebody that's 20 years old today, I mean, there really is no music scene anymore. I mean, music is not made for the sense of making music. Music is made as a soundtrack to a celebrity's, you know, clothing line. It's like there's no the essence of what making music means is gone. I mean, sure, there's things out there, people slugging it out, putting out independent records, playing the clubs, sure, but no one's going to hear about any of this stuff. What made rock stars were the record companies putting the money and the power and the juice behind it to make it huge. Without that, no one's going to hear about it. The next great new Led Zeppelin could be playing right down the street from you. No one's going to know about it because there's nobody putting $1 million worth of promotion into it. So, so the music business today it's, you know, a shadow of former self.
Yeah, of course. How do you feel about that? I've talked about this with some other artists as well. How do you feel about that? Is it a necessity? Because I always look at it this way too, where are some of our biggest stars? They're 6 feet under because they're
all gone.
A lot of times it's because of habits that have taken them out, because they were trying to fucking cope with what the music industry was proposing they had to do in order to stay on top. And you're like, they don't give a shit. It's a hard line, because they give a shit about you when you're out there struggling, and you have something that they deem the world needs to have. And then once it gets to that point, as we've all seen, it almost seems like, well, then it goes into that thing that we know and love to hate, is we just give a shit about what you've done for us lately. And
that's it, though. It's if they love you when they're making money from you, that's the bottom line. I mean, you know, I was in the music business for a lot of years. I was LA Gunn's road manager, their whole first tour, 88. You know, I've done a lot of different things, and as long as you're making money, everyone's happy. And as soon as you're like, I just watched that new documentary, The Nothing But a Good Time.
Oh, good. How'd you like it?
It was okay. I mean, it's a lot of the same old stuff.
Okay, because I'm thinking somebody like you would, since you've been a part of it as a musician and part of it as a working employee of the industry, as a manager, then and you worked for a label.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool. I mean, it's all nostalgia. There's,
Mm-hmm.
it's a nostalgia for a time that was easy, free. There was no woke. There was no, women were women, and there was no, everything today is sexual harassment, and it didn't exist all that. Now, I'm not saying that it was all great and
Right.
people didn't get hurt or suffer
Right.
or whatever or traumatized.
Right.
But it was just a simpler time, and it doesn't exist anymore. So people have a nostalgia for that. When I was in high school, in the 70s, Happy Days was big.
Yep.
And everybody dressed up like the 50s at times. You had 50s Day. It was dress up. It was nostalgia. It's the same thing happening today. You go on Instagram, you see all these young people dressed up like glam rockers and groupies, and it's fun. It's just because today sucks for these people. What are they gonna, there's no fun anymore, and it's a much more dangerous world. So you can't just be out there like a lunatic like you used to be. Sure, bad things happened back then, but it was a different mindset. Society had a different mindset. It was, the 80s were the 80s. It was, it was pretty, but the documentary is pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of the same old crap, I mean, it's like, who's hair metal, who's not hair metal. It's like, it gets like, it's kind of been beaten to death by this point.
Right.
The whole, and I look at this resurgence really started happening with the first M3 shows that were going on, and Rocklahoma, and when that started, and then the Dirt movie came out, and that's what the Motley movie started the nostalgia rush for this era. But it's like beaten to death at this point. It's like it's the same old thing. You've heard about it a million times, but what's next? I mean, you're gonna have a grunge revival. That wasn't a lot of fun. Grunge, that whole scene wasn't fun.
I was definitely, I guess if I could say, I was too old for that, because I didn't get it. Either the lyrics were like whatever, or the music was just or
I was working as a DJ at the nightclub Limelight in Manhattan, all from those, from I think I started there in 89 or 90, and I worked all the way through almost to the end of the 90s. But all those bands played Limelight on Sunday night, Rock and Roll Church, Pearl Jam, White Zombie, Rage Against the Machine, all that kind of stuff. Marilyn Manson. So it was a reaction against Warrant and wearing white matching leather suits, singing Heaven, so that's what it was a reaction against. It got to the point where, it was just formula, cookie cutter. Everything looked the same, sounded the same video director, same costume designer. It was just like, so it just burned out. But the 80s were a lot of fun. It was to me, the last era of legal, reckless abandon. Crack really didn't enter the scene till like really like mid 80s to the end of the 80s. So like, cocaine was still expensive, and, it was a elitist thing. And, there was no AIDS really, even though AIDS existed. AIDS didn't really become a thing in the national consciousness until Magic Johnson got AIDS. And that was when was that end of the 90s? I mean, end of the 80s or something, end of the 80s, maybe, I can't remember. So it was just different, man. I mean, that's why all these young kids are so into this whole hair band scene and dressing up and, trying to recreate it, but you can't recreate it because the world's a mess. It's just a different world.
It is. It is.
And the big thing, no internet back then, no social media, no camera phones. It was a different world. Yeah. You could go do things and not worry about somebody's going to put it on a reel tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I was just talking about that recently, where, there's a lot of the young kids are just wearing hoodies all the time. you know, and we want to look at it and kind of go, what the hell's that all about? And you're like, well, yeah, but think about it. I mean, there's cameras everywhere. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be young like that today. And
Yeah, either I am.
I mean, I'd be fearing for my freaking privacy right and left. It was bad enough. All right, I say bad enough because when you're a kid, it's bad enough. I'm not sitting here going, oh, it's bad enough that there's parents. Not my point. My point is, as a kid, it's bad enough when you're a kid to go, well, my parents are watching everything I do, or they're so strict. Well, now it's not just your freaking parents. It's the real big brother looking at every intersection you're at, every website you're at, every phone call you make, every picture you look at on the internet. It's everywhere.
Well, these kids, I mean, you know, I've got a 30-year-old son. He's born in 94.
Mm-hmm.
So he's 30 years old. He doesn't remember time before computers. So yeah. When you're raised with that, it becomes normalized. Exactly. And then it doesn't, you know, you're not worried about cameras. I mean, it's part of life. It's like, oh, you're just, you know, you're overreacting or whatever.
Right.
I react the way I do because I was born in 1960. Yep. So, but kids don't realize that. Young people, they just are, it's like, okay. It's like, oh, it's part of life now, you know? So maybe for them, but this is why I live in the middle of the desert and then nobody around.
Right. Right.
I lived in the craziest environments my whole life. I'm like, you know, this is the time to just, you know, reflect.
Yeah. Because tell me, so you were born in New York.
Yes.
Right. And you lived there until you were how old?
Well, I was born in New York. I lived there till I was about 12 or 13. My parents divorced. I moved with my mom to Georgia for 5 years because that's where she was from. Then I moved back to New York in 78, finished my high school up there. And I immediately became a nightclub DJ. That's all I wanted to do was be a DJ in clubs. And I did that from, I was still in high school. I was working at my dad actually had an after hours club. And I would start work there at 2 a.m. and finish like noon the next day.
Wow.
And I was in high school. So I started that. And then I just kept getting in bigger clubs and, you know, bigger situations. And then I started working for this record distributor and I was a DJ at the same time. I started meeting all these bands. My friends were in bands. And then, you know, one thing leads to another. And I ended up I became the director of promotions for Relativity Combat Records in 87.
Well, so then interesting because I was working with those things. That's why I was going to say it's kind of interesting when you mentioned about Relativity, because then, you know, back when I was doing interviews and things like that, which was a little bit after, but during that time, I started doing those in say 88, 89. I started doing interviews. Like I interviewed Striper for In God We Trust. So that was my first interview away from college. I did an interview with Ronnie Montrose on the radio in 86, but boom, then for print, that was my first one. And then I spoke with Satriani and I knew Shotgun Messiah was out on Relativity. So was that a situation real quick? I guess I want to ask that. Was that a situation where Relativity seemed like a place they could go to with some of those more hair metal bands than to stick with Combat? Did they kind of start flowing that through Relativity because of those things?
Well, that's a good question. Well, Relativity started first. And they, the first Talus record, Sheehan was on Relativity.
Okay.
And then they also had the band TKO.
Yep.
Was on Relativity. And then they started Combat. Once they got into the thrash scene, they started Combat. But I left there in end of 87. I went to work for LA Guns in 88. So
gotcha.
But yes, Shotgun Messiah was, I believe,
they were 89, I think it was.
Licensing deal. You know, they did a lot of licensing. It might have been, I don't know, available in Europe and they licensed it for America.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they, you know, Relativity, the two records that put Relativity on the map was when I was working there was Surfing with the Alien, Joe
Yep.
Satriani, and there was a band called the Brandos
Oh,
that no one wanted to sign except me and the owner of the company. They were like very Creedence meets Tom Petty, John Cougar, very commercial sounding.
wow.
But the label at the time wanted to break into that bigger world. They
Okay.
they wanted to get radio play. They didn't want to just be on the college station at 2 a.m. They wanted to be on WNEW, big rock station in New York City. So you can't do that with any of these other bands. Satriani was different because it was, guitar stuff. The
Right.
Brandos had songs. They had this song called Gettysburg. And we signed that band. We got on pretty much about 60, maybe 70% of all the major rock stations. We had all the independent radio guys working it, spent a lot of money, but it got relativity to the point where people would play, Boogie with Satch.
Yes.
So now, did the Brandos have any lasting impact? Not really, but it got us in the game of spending money and trying to compete with Atlantic and Columbia and all these labels. So the Brandos opened the doors. Satriani came in, and then shortly after that, they started. Thrash was kind of dying out, and then they started doing all this like hip hop stuff. Relativity. They had I started another label. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a hip hop label. They moved offices to Hollis, Queens, and then shortly after I left there, by '89, they had sold the company to Sony. Relativity, and that was it. And Sony owned them, and the distributor went away, and they took all the titles, which was a lot of catalog, and Sony owns it to this day. So, yeah, Relativity was, they had Robin Hitchcock, the Cocteau Twins,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Jim Thirlwell and Fetus. All this weird, crazy college stuff that was very, very big on that underground. But the Push Twangers and Scruffy the Cat, and none of these bands really sold any records. But on the college level, you could get college radio play, and if you didn't spend a lot to make the record, if the budget was really small, you could actually make money. The label, whether they paid the bands is a whole nother story, but the label made money on these releases because they didn't spend much. There wasn't like a big cash outlay to make a Scruffy the Cat record. I mean, it was done cheap. And this is the other thing which people don't take into account is they pressed so many records, Relativity and Combat. I mean, thousands. So all the pressing plants wanted their business. And once you get into the flow, you always end up owing them money. You might owe them $100,000. But they're not going to tell you, I'm not going to press anymore, because if they do that, you'll never get paid. So that's how it works. So they just keep pressing. The plant needs money. They'll throw them 30, 40 grand here or there, and they keep pressing. And there was so many titles, and that's what made the money. The more product in the marketplace, the bigger the checks from the stores and the chains. And that's why they sold it to Sony for 1989. I think they sold to Sony for $10 million, which then 10 million was probably like 50 million today.
That's also interesting, because I've noticed that at some of these, like Half Price Books bought somebody's, they must have worked somewhere in distribution somewhere along the line, because I bought 3 copies of Stone Blue by Foghat, because they had purchased somebody's sealed collection, which they must have just had them in cases and then just maybe divvied them out a little bit. So they had Player and Firefall and Foghat, all these things from the 70s into the 80s that are still sealed, and now they're at used record stores here.
Well, what was happening too, I mean, I read a lot. Like I said, there's a lot of books about the music industry in those days that, I mean, labels would press stuff under the table. So you would say whatever, you'd make a deal with a cutout house that deals with cutouts, stuff that's, so they would be like, well, we're going to press, 5,000 of the fog hat and 5,000 of the player, whatever. It's under the table, not reported. No one's getting any royalties on it. And they press it under the table and sell it to these cutout houses to make cash. It's that was going on for years. I mean, the stories of the bootleg, I won't say bootleg, but the counterfeit.
Yeah.
Saturday Night Fever and Grease soundtracks. There was thousands of counterfeits. The mob gets involved. They control pressing plants and you start pressing. So all this stuff that's sealed is probably under the table somewhere. It's like, it didn't come through normal channels.
That's wild.
Listen, it happened at Relativity and Combat. There was salesmen that worked there that would take a box. Box at that time was 25 records. They take a box of Metallica, kill them all. They sneak it out, put it in their coat, and go sell it to a record store and put cash in their pocket. That's been going on since time immemorial. It's just that was the record business back then. You only made money back then if you were like Bon Jovi selling 20 million records. That's how you made money. If you sold a million copies of something in 1985, the bands didn't make any money. Nobody made any money. The record label made money. So, LA Guns, I worked for LA Guns. They had 2 gold albums.
Yeah.
You see behind me there. First LA Guns and Cocked and Loaded went gold. They never went platinum, no matter what anybody will tell you. They went gold. LA Guns never made any money. They never made anything big. Sure, they'd get a check from a merchandising advance or a publishing advance, and they'd put $10,000 in their pocket and go buy a guitar. But there was never any big money. They owed the label so much money for videos and tour support and this and that. And that's how all those bands were. You only made money if you were Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi big. That's how, then you made money.
Yeah.
But if you sold 1 million copies in 1985, you probably still owed the label money.
Wow. Man.
But without those guys that owed you the money pushing you, you would have never been big or had a name that you can still go and play the casino down the road here. Molly Hatchet and April Wine are playing the casino down the road in the tribal lands. And there's not one person in either of those bands that is the original member. But because Molly Hatchet had Flirting with Disaster, they can go play a casino and make money. So that's what it did for you. That's why LA Guns can still go out and play and make money today, Tracy and Phil, because they had the Polygram machine behind them for 3 albums. And the push gave them a name that they can ride on today.
Wow.
To me, that's how it works.
Yeah, because I was actually, I was into the music scene, like, writing and meeting up with people. Did you know Jeff Ifland?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. He was our Polydor Polygram guy here in St. Louis. He used to work for Geffen Records. And he's since passed, not within the last year or so. And unfortunately, and I got to know him really well during that time frame, during the Locked and Loaded, right? Locked and Loaded, right?
Cocked and Loaded.
Cocked and Loaded. Great album cover. And some of the subsequent single stuff that came from that I got from him, and actually a T-shirt. I went and played a gig in my hometown area called Rockin' Skull, and LA Guns was there, and I had the T-shirt from back then, and I had it on, and then I took it off, and he held it up on stage. It was neat to have that there. It was a great time. I mean, those were great records, and I hear what you're saying. It's so wild.
Yeah, I mean that LA Guns is a weird situation because the Guns N' Roses is Tracy Guns, so they always were in the shadow of Guns N' Roses, and all the interviews that Tracy did back then, they asked him about Guns N' Roses, so it was very frustrating. The difference between the first LA Guns record and the second, the sound is incredible difference to me, because they were more of a raw kind of like punkish rock band. First album. Second album, they got a new manager, big time manager, big time booking agent, and they wanted to be big. So how do you do that in 1989? You bring in outside songwriters and you bring in this slick producer, and that's what they did. So they sold out what they were to try to be bigger, and it really didn't work. Yes, they had a top 40 single, Ballad of Jane, barely made the top 40, but that wasn't LA Guns. They were one, but once you get in that loop and everybody's in your ear, this is what you need to do. And they got a new manager, slick manager, Alan Kovac, who managed Motley Crue in their reunion. He used to manage Richard Marx. So they got into a different world where it was like, look, you want to be on the radio, this is what you have to do. You have to completely change what you are. And that's what they did because they wanted to be big. So
that's just nuts.
They would have sold the mother to be big. They just wanted to be big.
Yeah.
And they listen, they achieved good success. When I was on the road with them, we opened for AC/DC and Iron Maiden, Ted Nugent, and for 10 months I was. So it was they achieved success, but they didn't have songs. And if you don't have songs, listen, their songs are okay, but they weren't, equivalent to top 40 hit songs. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, it's one of those times that even when it's something good, you say it is what it is. It's not this, but it is what it is, and that's going to strike with somebody, right?
I mean, LA Guns, they were just, I don't know. I think they were in over their heads on Cocked and Loaded as far as they were just trying too hard.
Well, and they have, what's really funny. Do you know Tom Werman?
I don't know him personally. I know who he is.
I just had to ask because it's funny. He's one of the producers on that record. And it's got Dwayne Barron as well. And of course, John Purdell. But
those two guys actually produced it. Tom Werman, they worked for Tom Werman and his producer stable. So they produced it, Purdell and Dwayne Barron. Yeah. Tom Werman was just like the executive producer. He really didn't do much.
Gotcha. It was funny because I was going to almost check out a piece of vinyl by a band named Stranger from on the MCA Records from back in that time frame. And I held off. The price was a little higher than I wanted to go anyway, but it had Tom Werman as the producer. I'm like, I can't trust it. Even though I own a lot of Tom Werman produced albums, I also own Tom Werman produced albums that are the least favorite of bands that I love, like Blue Oyster Cult. The only thing I think that I shouldn't say it that way, but the one thing I always thought was anybody who worked with Tom Werman was Ted Nugent, because Ted's going to make sure it goes Ted's way. So
yeah, I mean, I don't look at Tom Werman as being a great producer. I mean,
no, me either.
He was he kind of like came out of that college world of degrees and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he did all the great Cheap Trick records, but Cheap Trick were great without Tom Werman.
Exactly.
Motley Crue, to make Shout at the Devil, he probably earned his money because those guys were, they weren't a great band to begin with. They were not really good. Tommy Lee held that band together. Without Tommy Lee, they would have been a complete wreck. But I mean, that's when to churn out that record, he earned his money. Like you said, Ted Nugent, Ted's going to do what he wants to do. And, so really all you really needed was a great engineer. If then
Werman, good way to put it. Good way to put it. You're absolutely right.
But listen, certain producers do a lot to me.
They do
shape the record.
Yes.
I don't know if Tom Werman shaped many records, but he got the job done, and he's Tom Werman. I mean, he's got a lot of success, so who can knock him?
Right. And you just wonder, and of course, I'm sure that some of these bands, especially like Twisted Sister, wonder what they would have had with somebody else.
I mean, I was a big Twisted Sister fan when they were a club band back in the late 70s here in New York. I saw them, I don't know, over 50, 60 times probably in the clubs. But yes, so their other record, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, I think was produced by Dieter Dierks.
I think you're right. The guy, yeah, Mr. Scorpions.
Yes, so that was a bit heavier sounding.
It was.
But they wanted to be bigger than that. And, they told them, look, this is what you have to do. They weren't happy. Dee did not like Tom Werman's, how it sounded. But, they did whatever they needed to do to be big.
Yeah.
And they said, look, this is the guy. This is the video director. This is what we're going to do. But this is what you have to give in a little. And they gave in, and they had a huge record. But like they've said in interviews, they do not like the way that Stay Hungry sounded. Yeah.
There's been lots of blowback on that one. It's especially like you said, as of late. I once told Jan Keeneman from Vixen, I said, who's going to be producing the next record? Because on that first record, they had a bunch of different people. And she goes, I don't know. Who would you suggest? I said, well, I wouldn't suggest Tom Werman. But there's a lot of other people out there that are really, really good, to check out.
Yeah. I mean, what a record producer did in the 1970s or the 80s is completely different today. It's all, computerized and digital. People do it at their house. You don't even need a producer anymore. But like those days, Tom Werman and, what's the guy that did the Cars?
Mutt Lange. There's
Mutt Lange. What's the guy? Roy Thomas Baker.
Cars
and Queen. I mean
Andy Johns.
Yes, that's when a producer was like part of the band almost. It was a different mindset.
Yes.
It's those days are long gone. So
I wish
we need a producer now.
I wonder what, I'm just going to throw this out there, and it really makes it's nothing too much for this time, but I just wonder what that Twisted Sister album would have been like if Martin Birch got a hold of it.
Listen, man, Twisted Sister in the club days, in 1980, 81, those guys were playing to 5,000 people in some places.
And constantly.
No record deal.
Right.
They were playing 5 nights a week, 3 sets a night for 10 years. So those guys were like probably the fastest, tightest, heaviest band I've ever seen in those days. Those guys were like, it was like a tank hitting you. They were an incredible band. That came from playing 3 sets a night for 10 friggin' years. Yeah. That's how they got to be that good. They were vicious, man, those days. And then, Stay Hungry was kind of like cartoon metal. But, that was the beginning of the end, actually. After that, they fell apart. But then Twisted Sister, to me, that was the first thrash metal I've ever heard, was Twisted Sister doing like, a Little Richard song or a Chuck Berry song, 1,000 miles an hour.
Yes.
They were vicious, man. No one could touch Twisted Sister back in those days. And they blew everybody off the stage, man, when they went out, when they started getting bigger and sharing the bill with bands. Their job was to like wipe the stage with everybody.
Absolutely.
They were great. They were a great band, Twisted Sister.
I also
realize how great they were because of Dee and the costumes and all that stuff.
Yeah, if you haven't seen any of their documentaries, people, check them out. Speaking of people, I wanted to say hello to Drew. We got some folks who are always here with us. Drew, Emma Jade. I want to make sure to see if there's anybody that's it's great to see Emma Jade. Metal Torso is here with us today. Salvatore is here as well. If you guys have any questions, Lance, our buddy Lance is here, and he and Emma Jade are telling us to smash that like button. Emma Jade, I smacked the crap out of that like button. I love it, but it only counts once. And there's some interesting things too. Jimi Hendrix passed away on this day in 70. Sure. Kiss removed their makeup and was on MTV this day in 83.
Oh, that was a beginning of the end there for me.
Well, let's get together again. I want to make sure that we, stick with what we got, but maybe you could come back and we could talk about some of that
anytime, man. I'm happy to do.
1970, Black Sabbath released Paranoid, and in 78, Kiss released all 4 of their solo albums. Today,
and on this day was the release of the first Twisted Sister album, Under the Blade, on Secret Records in England.
Dude, I was just going to mention that record too while we were talking, because the first thing I ever saw by them was You Can't Kill Rock and Roll. I saw the video, fell immediately in love with that. That became like a personal anthem sound to me. I was just like, this is a great fucking song. And then I remember buying Under the Blade on vinyl as well, and I've still got it here, and just great stuff. Great stuff.
All those songs on Under the Blade, most of them were part of their club repertoire. But even at that point, when they were playing clubs and doing originals, they still had to play cover songs. The clubs did not give a crap. They could care less. They had an audience that wanted to hear Judas Priest and Van Halen and AC/DC songs. So Twisted Sister and every other club band that played in Long Island and New York area played, like Zebra.
Yep.
Half covers, half originals. That's just what you did. So Twisted were like, putting out an album, and they're still playing some cover songs in the bars. But that's what made that's how they were making this crazy money they were making. They made more money playing in the bars than they ever did as a huge band. The only person in that band that made any money was Dee, because he wrote all the songs.
Right.
But when Twisted were at their peak in the club world, they were making, 7, 8, 10 grand a night, 5 nights a week, that was like an even split. 5 guys, you just split it up. So once they got signed to a big deal, Dee wrote all the songs, and that's where the money is. I mean, yes, I'm sure they all made money from the mechanical royalties and the sales of the actual vinyl record and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Concert money. But it was, you're on the treadmill. The more you make, the more you have to spend to stay at that level. It's like you just keep spending more money, more tour support, more this, more that. You just keep spending. So you're making, but you're spending just as much. So in the club world, those guys got in their car and drove home with, end of the weekend, they had, thousands of dollars in their pocket.
Wow.
So it's just a different thing with Twisted. But yeah, Twisted, that first album was released today, 1982.
Yeah, looks like it right there. Lance pulled it up for us too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I just so glad we made our way around to that, even if it is for the Werman reason. But,
Werman reason.
Now, how was it when you guys were recording in 85? Just very quickly, who did you work with when you were recording that?
The Sweet Pain record?
Yes.
That record the band was formed, the songs were written, and it was recorded within months. The record took, I think we recorded for 2 days.
Okay.
And the guy that was the producer was this guy, Eric Williams, who was an African-American guy who was in a band from New York called, what was the name of his band? I can't remember the name of his band now, but he had a band that was out on Relativity.
Okay.
And then when it came time to do the Sweet Pain record, the owner of the company said, Eric, you should produce this because you would understand this more than anybody else for whatever reason. So Eric produced it. The other guy that was in the band with this guy, Eric, was a guy named Mark Linkus, who later on had this project called Sparkle Horse, I think it was called. That was a big I think that's a very collectible record right now, Sparkle Horse. Anyway, this guy, Eric Williams, produced the Sweet Pain. He was in a band on Relativity Records. And I mixed it in LA with a guy named Randy Burns. Randy Burns did all the thrash metal stuff for Combat, Possessed and all that stuff. I mixed it with him, but recorded it in 2 days, mixed it in 1 day. It was done so quick. We did it in a little studio on Long Island that was in somebody's garage. And we would just, I don't know about anybody else, but I was all fucked up, and we just went in there and just did it in like 2 days. It was like, we barely even knew what we were doing. Kelly Nichols' contribution was Shoot for Thrills, which is on the first LA Guns album. They re-recorded that song. Sweet Pain did it first. He had actually he didn't even want us to record that song. He probably thought we were going to fuck it up. So he brought that song in. It was almost like it had just been written kind of thing. And we recorded it like one take. And it was like not the greatest, but it's what came out on that record.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was do it cheap, get it out quick. Let's get it out for the Christmas season or whatever. That's
Right.
kind of like what it was, but it was not a lot of technical expertise. I do have to say that we covered the Stars song, Subway Terror. And Richie Rano from Stars actually plays guitar on that and he sings on it and he produced that song for us. Richie Rano.
Richie's a great guy, man.
Yeah, I mean, I gotten friendly with Richie back in the early days of Sweet Pain, and at the time, Stars were no one even knew or cared what Stars were. I knew. I mean, I love Stars. There you go. Violation.
The original release of Subway Terror.
There's a band right there, way overlooked. And man, they were so. I think what really did that band in.
Yeah, please.
Richie has told me that Capitol Records. Richie told me Capitol Records didn't really care about them. They cared about Bob Seger at the time, which was big with Night Moves and everything.
Right.
But they were managed by Kiss's manager, Bill Aucoin.
Yeah,
that's what did them in. Kiss would never. Kiss were pissed off that Aucoin took on other acts beside Kiss. They wanted him to be their manager and only Kiss. So he took on other acts, and the band kind of suffered because they couldn't really go all out because the Kiss guys were like keeping them in check.
Oh,
they didn't want them to be too big. But I'm telling you now, those 4 Stars albums,
all 4 of them,
some of the best hard rock playing.
Oh my God.
Singing, amazing lyrics.
Yes.
Michael Lee Smith was an incredible lyricist. Stars was a big influence on Motley Crue. If you listen to Looks That Kill,
yeah,
the riff on the chorus is part of Subway Terror. It's the exact same thing. Nikki Sixx, big Stars fan. So yeah, man. Talk about a band that, they had a top 40 hit with Cherry Baby.
Yep.
That was really it. They opened for everybody under the sun. They were a great, great band. Just never made it, man. Never made it big.
Yeah. The 4 albums by them, you've got Stars, you've got Attention Shoppers, you've got Violation, and you've got Coliseum Rock. So
yeah,
those 4, a while back when I met Richie, I met him out in Vegas. Actually, what a beautiful night that was. We'll talk about that another time. But I asked him, I said, are these available? Because I've got their first, I've got more of it on vinyl now, obviously you can see, but I started off with their first album years ago, and then I had it on vinyl, but didn't have a turntable on which to play it. And so then I purchased all of them from him on CD when he did that big re-release. And there's not a clunker in the bunch. And you've got stuff on there from did Nikki Sixx do a little quote on for those? And so did Joe Perry.
I think some of the guys, some people did like
they like wrote a little thing that they
thing about Stars.
Testimonial, yeah.
Yeah. They Richie was the last to join Stars. Stars came out of the band Looking Glass. Brandy, You're a Fine Girl.
Yes.
So the drummer and the bass player in Looking Glass, Joe X. Dubé and Peter Swival, that was the nucleus of Stars. And they originally were called Fallen Angels. And they had a keyboard player. And it was Joe X. Dubé, Peter Swival, Brendan Harkin. And they had a keyboard player, and then they got Richie Rano in as a second guitarist. They got rid of the keyboard player, and then they became Stars. But they came out of the, Michael Lee Smith told me one time that, in the beginning days of Fallen Angels, they still had gigs booked as Looking Glass because they were good paying gigs. And he actually became this singer in Looking Glass after the original guy quit or left or whatever. Michael Lee Smith sang in Looking Glass, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. So those guys had a good pop sensibility, and they had the crunch. You know, Richie's guitar sound is the Tom Scholz Rockman. Tom Scholz came out with that little contraption, the Rockman. Richie heard the first Boston record and got the Rockman like that next day or whatever, and used it on the Stars albums. That's why those guitars on those records sound so great.
So huge.
Great.
That, along with the composition, is just beautiful.
Great songs all around. I mean, they just, one of my favorite bands is Stars.
Absolutely.
But, it was a time and a place.
Yeah. I just thought that was so great when I was looking at your album, and I'm like, wait a minute, Subway Terror. I mean, there's just no way that's not a cover of Stars, and
I met Richie and I said, look, I was telling about the band. I said, I want to do a Stars song, but I can't really sing. So I'm like, Michael Lee Smith can sing. So I'm like, can't do this, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. So we said, well, just do Subway Terror. It fits the band. It's crazy and aggressive. So that's how that came about. But at the time, no one knew who Stars were. In 1985, Stars were like, no one cared or knew. And it wasn't until I actually, I did an in-store. I was working at an in-store record appearance for Wasp in 84, 85 in Long Island. And Richie Rano gave me a Stars shirt to give Randy Piper from Wasp, because Randy Piper was a huge Stars fan. Wow. And I gave him the Stars t-shirt from Richie, and he was like freaking out. All those guys, Motley, Wasp, they all loved Stars. They appreciated who Stars were. But, Stars 76 to 78 years.
Yeah. And what a great, that's where it goes. It's a great body of work. Now, you also mentioned just now that you're like, well, I'm not a singer. So do you consider yourself kind of you have that punk vocal? Is that how do you describe your voice then?
I don't know. It's very Johnny Rotten, but it's also a little Paul Stanley. It's like, it's your influences of what you like. But again, those songs were written so fast and recorded so quickly. There was no time to let anything germinate. There wasn't like, okay, we'll figure out a melody line next week, or
there you go.
Any of that, just like bang, 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 bang. So it was like, write them, record them, get out of there. It was like, that's what happened. And so there was no germination of, I think we recorded that album before we even ever played a gig.
Wow.
So we recorded the record and then we started gigging.
Now that's crazy.
That's what happened. I mean, again, it was only because the Combat owner was like, just do this. We'll pay for your rehearsals. We'll pay for whatever. So that's what happened. We put out a record, and then our second gig we ever did, we opened for Ace Frehley in March of 85 in Lemoore in Brooklyn, which is a tough, heavy metal club.
Oh yeah.
Ace had been underground. So Ace comes back out of retirement and he starts playing. So this was one of his first shows. Nobody's seen or heard from Ace Frehley in, 5 years. So we got the gig to open for Ace.
Wow.
So we opened for Ace Frehley, and his sound check went on for hours.
Oh, shit.
And it was cold. It was March in New York. It was cold. People were waiting online, like 1,000 people online all day. So the doors are supposed to open it out at whatever, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
9 o'clock, they're still not open. People are mad. People are getting surly. Everybody was pissed off. So we get in there. They put us in the basement in a dressing room that's like, 20 below zero. We didn't know what was going on. So somebody comes up and goes, you're on in 5 minutes. We had no sound check. We had nothing. So we go up there, and the place has had to be 2,000 people in there. Okay. So they had a big video screen that they would show videos. So we're behind the video screen on the stage, and everybody's you could hear stuff hitting the screen, like bottle cans. People are going, Ace, Ace, Ace. And nobody even heard of us before.
Oh, man.
It didn't really sound great. And man, so much crap got thrown on that stage. I got hit in the head with a bottle. I was bleeding. It was, but I didn't retreat. I did the old punk rock thing on him and said, you know what? I was ready to dive in the crowd. So, jacked up on drugs and alcohol. So that gig was like the war. That was like a war gig. And everybody else in the band was like scared shitless. I didn't care. I was like ready. I went out in the crowd after our set and was drinking. I didn't care. Everybody else went home. So that was our second gig. And we, the first gig was at Lemoore in Queens. There were two Lemoores. The one in Queens, we played on a Wednesday night. I don't know, a few hundred people there. But by the spring and summer of '85, we were playing Lemoore, Queens and selling it out, packed. But that only lasted for a few months. Then Kelly Nichols quit, went to LA. The drummer quit. I got new members and it just fell apart after a while.
Oh, that sucks.
It was never meant to last. It was like of the moment. I
guess. Yeah.
I went along with it because it didn't cost me anything. And it was, I was crazy and wild in those days.
Yeah.
And after that band broke up, I broke the band up in late '86 or middle of '86. And then I went back to work for Relativity. I started out doing radio promotion, and then within a few months, I was the director of promotions, and I was going out to LA every month on business, and that's how I hooked up with Kelly and the LA Guns guys and got to come work for them.
Well, everything happens for a reason, right? I mean, that's kind of the way I always look at it, and it's
it all starts from me being a club DJ.
Right.
That's all I ever wanted to be was a nightclub DJ in the disco days when it meant something. When I was playing at a club called Malibu on Long Island in 1981, 82.
Mm-hmm.
And Malibu held 3,000 people. And they had bands, B-52s, Ramones, U2, Psychedelic Furs. That scene was happening. So that's all I ever wanted to do. And all this other stuff just kept falling in my lap. And I just would say yes or no. Okay, let's do it. And that's really how I got to work with LA Guns and everything else. It just all fell in my lap.
I think, there's a real interesting thought there when you think about, for me, like I reacted to it like, oh, that sucks. Because I have a band here and we do covers. I would like to get into some original material, but that's not for right now. But it's kind of an interesting thought. Like you said, well, it was okay because one reason I would assume that would make it like you just said, where you're like, well, it was such a pick up and go thing. It's not like you spent 10 years building up this band and you finally made it. It was like, oh, we got it. We're doing it. We got these guys. Here are the songs and let's go.
That's exactly right. There was no, I didn't put any years of trying to be in a band and all that kind of thing. That was never part of it. It was just, I never set out to be a road manager, but I became a road manager on the road with a big touring band for a year. So, I never thought I was going to be in a band, then once I got in it, I knew we weren't good enough to actually do anything. So I just went along with it because it was the '80s and somebody was paying for it. So why not?
Well, yeah.
But yeah, so out of that, if you're into the scene and metal and glam or whatever, and LA Guns, Kelly Nichols, he came from Sweet Pain, and the guy from the Throbs came from Sweet Pain. So there's just that link. But it was a lot of fun and it was crazy times. I mean, that was probably when I was at my most messed up. Alcohol and drugs was those Sweet Pain days. I mean, I was, 84. Well, I started the whole scene and, really started in the late '70s. But by the time I got into the band and it was '85,
right.
Yeah, it was Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, it's just
right. You must. I think about it, and then I'm thinking about one of my favorite movies is, of course, Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg, and the band starts in '80. It's in '85, so you're like, interesting. I love that movie. I don't love all the music choices, but when I'm watching it, I'm like, probably could have used this instead. You
Yeah,
know,
I saw that movie once. I mean, it was okay. I mean,
yeah,
it's very, very, very hard to make a movie about a rock band, especially somebody like Queen or Elton John. I mean, all those movies are okay.
yeah,
They're really not great. You know, I always said if Freddie Mercury was alive today and saw that guy playing him on the screen, he would be so pissed off. He would be mad because it's just not really a good representation. It's like, how do you get guys to play Motley Crue? Or how would
right,
you get guys to play the Ramones? It's like, yeah, you can find somebody that looks that way.
yeah,
Can't capture,
nope, no,
whoever. I mean,
and
what other movies are out there about,
well, we mentioned the dirt and stuff, and I was just also talking about, and I've got it right back here, is the Hysteria movie that they made of Def Leppard for VH1 Classic. That was so many years ago.
I remember that.
And I was telling Joe, the owner of Joe's Records, I was telling him today that I said one of the reasons I really liked that movie is and liked is liked, not necessarily believing, but liking it, was because when they had a moment where they were talking about Mutt Lange, he was like, "Yeah, I'm familiar with your work," says the guy playing Joe Elliott. "You've worked with boop boop Outlaws." When he said Outlaws, I was like, "Well, okay, I'll give you guys a few props." Because at the time that movie was made, I'm like, nobody knows about the Outlaw.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about Outlaws right here. And I'm like, that's pretty interesting that you put that in there. There's a lot of other bands you could have put in there that
Yeah.
he's worked with, you know?
Who knows why those things happen?
Yeah.
Somebody involved with the movie might have mentioned this band. Who knows? You don't really know. But
Yep.
yeah, but people would never know about the Outlaws today. That
Nope.
they were like one of those bands that just never really had hits. If you didn't,
They had one at least, with
Ghost Rider.
There Goes Another Love Song. And,
Oh no,
then
that was Marshall Tucker band.
well, they had a different one. I know what you're talking
about. Heard It in a Love Song.
Heard It in a Love Song. But yeah, There Goes Another Love Song was from early Outlaws. And then they, Hurry Sundown was pretty big in my area, some of those. And then they had their Bring 'Em Back Alive album. And then they put on which they had a piece of You Are the Show. And then they did the recorded version of You Are the Show on that album that I'm talking about that Mutt Lange produced, which is Playing to Win. And a great freaking record. Great record. I think that was the second, that was the first record outside the live album with Freddie Salem, I think. Because Henry Paul would have been fired by then. And they got Freddie Salem instead. So
Henry Paul Band.
Yeah, and then the Henry Paul Band. I love it. Love it. That is some good stuff.
My first concert I ever went to was when I moved to Georgia with my mom, 1974, Leonard Skinner, Second Helping Tour, was my first concert.
Wow.
And the band that opened that night was the Outlaws. And that night, which I read in a book years later, that night, Clive Davis from Arista Records came to that show in Columbus, Georgia, and signed the Outlaws. And Ronnie Van Zant told him, you need to sign this band. He came to look at him, and Ronnie Van Zant told Clive Davis, you've got to sign this band. And Clive Davis signed them. And I didn't know that. I didn't know who the Outlaws were. They opened for Leonard Skinner. And Leonard Skinner was, big in the South, but they just Sweet Home Alabama had just come out. So that was starting to happen. But I didn't know the Outlaws. And then years later, you start seeing their records in the store. I'm like, oh, that was that band that opened for Skinner.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah. Same thing. I went to see Foreigner in 77 in Georgia.
Holy crap.
First Foreigner album.
Yeah.
And in those days, they didn't always list the opening act. It was just Foreigner. Yeah. So when I got to the show, I was always early. There was no seats on the floor. So there's a little auditorium and you ran to the front, Mm-hmm. And I look and I see Rick Nielsen. But at the time, I'd never heard Cheap Trick. But I'd seen his picture in Cream magazine. I go, because he's so unmistakable, Rick Nielsen. I go, that's a weird dude. They must be opening for Foreigner. And they opened for Foreigner. And man, the next day I went out and bought In Color, their new album. Didn't know who the opening band was, but that's how you discovered stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheap Trick and Foreigner, September 1977.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty amazing. Those were amazing days. I remember seeing Rush for Moving Pictures in Alpine Valley, and I didn't know who was opening. And then here they come out on stage. They start playing Toys in the Attic, and I'm like, oh, it's Joe Perry. Oh, wow, it's the Joe Perry Project is opening. And it was great to see that. What an awesome concert.
That happened a lot in those days. You didn't know who the opening act was. It wasn't like, because Cheap Trick might open for Foreigner for, I don't know, a week. And then a week later, it's somebody else. And, just jumping around a lot. A lot of that it's not like today where bands, there's like a package and they go on tour for 3 months. It's like you just hop from thing to thing, whatever was available. So that was one of those shows.
That's cool.
I couldn't believe it, but I knew. See, that was the thing. I recognized Rick Nielsen immediately because I'd seen his picture in Cream, and I'm like, no one looked like that.
No, not at all. No.
Oh, that's that guy. So it was and they were just Cheap Trick, one of my favorite bands. I mean, they're
freaking amazing. They
sound great.
Yeah. I think the only weird thing to me about Cheap Trick was becoming familiar with them off the Budokan record. And then like Kiss, same thing. I got to know them on the Alive album, and then went back and you listen to those songs on the studio and you're like, whoa. It's kind of like when I saw Dave Mason live and then went back and bought some of his older stuff to listen to those songs. And I'm like, they sure don't sound the same. They're very much more simplistic than it is here live and full of, full of balls.
Those first 3 Cheap Trick records. That was Worman at the label's direction to make them sound radio friendly. So that's what that was. But yes, live they were much heavier and much more raw. But like I Want You to Want Me, like the studio version is like
so different.
See, with the piano and everything. So
yeah.
But Cheap Trick live were one of the best live bands I've ever seen. They just
absolutely.
I saw them in 77, 78, 79, 80. I saw Cheap Trick so many times back in those days, and they were just on fire.
Wow.
Robin Zander, one of the greatest voices ever.
You're absolutely right. Great. Yes. And I love that he appeared on the Steel Panther cover of She's Tight. I thought that was great.
Yeah, he doesn't take himself seriously, you see. I have had occasion to talk to him and he doesn't take himself seriously like that. Like a lot of people be like, if they ask the guys from Motley Crue to be on the Steel Panther record, they'd be like, no way. Those guys make fun of us or whatever. But Robin Zander's like, I don't care. I'm secure in my voice and my track record, dude. Let's do it.
Yes. And he's got a hell of a sense of humor, I think, right?
Great guy. Very funny and very he doesn't take himself seriously. That's what too many of the glam hair metal bands in the 80s, they took themselves too friggin' seriously. This is just rock and roll, dude. There's so much petty drama over just nothing. But that's ego.
You're right.
Catch-22. You got to have the ego to be a star, but it always screws you up down the road somewhere.
Yeah, it seems like they would be the same. It would be the same anecdote about a crab in a bucket. And then they just, if you put too many of them in, they just keep pulling each other down. It's like,
just drama, and
it's a fight for survival. And yet at the same time, you're like, I bet if you guys just worked together. And I think there were some bands we've heard, I have to go by stories. I have to go by what I hear. I didn't live there. I didn't live throughout that situation. I have a neighbor though, that lived out in California kind of during that time frame, but you're like, there are some bands that were civil with each other or whatever, or worked together or had members that switched from one to another. And, but you're like, all in all, if you just chill out maybe a little bit, because I was going to ask you this too, knowing that you were into punk as well. I was going to ask you, when it comes to the decline of Western civilization films, are you just as equal on one as you are on two, being a fan of or a member within both of those genres?
Well, the first one, the punk rock one,
Mm-hmm.
was an LA punk rock. So LA punk rock was not really even.
No, you're right.
I don't know what that was. LA punk, Circle Jerks,
Okay.
the Weirdos, and the Go-Go's. It's just like there was LA punk rock was like, you can't have punk rock and palm trees in the same thing. It just doesn't. Whereas the CBGB punk rock scene, which the Dead Boys, even though they're from Cleveland, they came out of CBs. The Ramones, the Heartbreakers, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, that was New York in the Bowery where CBGB's was in 1977, 78.
Mm-hmm.
It was grungy, man. I mean, you get your throat cut down there. It was real. And then where the Pistols came from in London, again, hard edged. LA punk is just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You can't have punk rock and palm trees. It just doesn't.
I think that's the name of your next book, right?
Punk rock. That's a good title, actually. Punk rock and palm trees.
Punk, because here's
I don't know. That's my book. Yes, Tales from the Go. Quick thing on the book. I wrote this book. I didn't intend to write a book. I was locked down over COVID and the pandemic. I had written lots of short stories. I had diaries. I had journals. I pulled it all out, put it together, put the book out, self-published it. It's on Amazon.
I got to get a copy of this.
It's my life in music. From a fan's perspective as a kid, through my DJ years, through meeting all these bands, Motley, partying with all these people, and then Sweet Pain, Relativity Records, working for LA Guns, post LA Guns, working at Limelight. It's my story of my life in music.
And it looks like, let's see, you can get it on Amazon for it's about $30 for the hardcover, little under $20 for the paperback, and you can Kindle it for $6.24 after credits.
Wow. Yeah, it's about look, the paperback's like $20, $18, something like that.
Yeah, I love hardcover though. I'm a big hardcover guy.
Yeah, I had to make sure I had a hardcover also for my library, but it's my life. It's not a definitive history of anything except me and my life in the music industry and my early experiences and concerts and like I said, I saw the Sex Pistols in Atlanta in '78. The tour that lasted, what it was, 8 shows, and then they broke up. But I've seen so many bands and so much over the years, and I was bored over the pandemic, and I started pulling out old journals and my LA Guns tour diaries, and I just started writing, man. And that's what the book is.
That's very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's and then is this the actual cover of the new release?
That's the cover of the new CD release, and that'll probably be the vinyl cover as well.
Cool. Very cool. And then it has released, or it's getting ready to release?
The CD is, well, it's a small label. So he put out the first pressing and it sold out. Okay. So he's waiting on the restock on the second press. So the CD is out of stock currently. I think the website is Vanity Music Group.
Okay. I'll put a link in then.
Yeah, Vanity Music Group is where then you click on there and then they have the store, and you can buy it from there. But it's out of stock right now. The vinyl, I don't know when that's coming in, but he presses small quantities, sells them out and represses them. So, but yeah, Vanity Music Group is where you would find it. It's I've already seen it on eBay for stupid money. I don't know why anybody would pay $60 for a CD that's just waiting for more copies to come back in. But it's a small, it was never meant to be a big thing. I had done this, like I said, in the 90s to remix it and everything. And a couple of people over the years were going to put it out and they got cold feet or didn't know. And I'm like, whatever. It's not like I'm going to die if it never comes out. But Dave Tedder and his crew were like, yeah, we're going to put this out. I was like, okay, great. Yeah. So it's got a good fold out on the inside cover. There's lots of pictures and the story of the band's history. And it's pretty extensive.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, like I say, as long as you're getting some bang for your buck, I'm almost sick of saying that now, just doesn't seem to suit me. I got to figure out a different way to say it. But as long as you're getting your money's worth, that's always a good one. With something special and something cool to check out, I love it. I mean, it's because it's really about for me, it's always been about tangibility, which is what I like about a hardcover book. That's you feel like you're building a cool library. It's tangible. It's not like you're going to put it down and it's going to fold over and get fucked up or whatever, or crush the spine or whatever.
I'm a big book fan. I've been a book fan since I was a child. I've always read. I've got lots of books. I read I'm always reading 2-3 books at once. I like the hardcovers.
Yeah. Was there a cool book? I used to do the same. When I was in high school, I've told this a million times to different people. Over the years, I've picked up books, and especially when I was in high school, I'd buy books. I loved them, but I never read them. I have a collection of them, but now I'm getting through some of them. Is there something that you purchased as a kid that you were like, I never read this, or maybe you did read everything, and then you finally did, and you're like, holy shit.
I usually read stuff right away. I'm looking at some of my books on the shelves here. I usually read right away. I mean, as a kid, I was a voracious reader. I read children's books. I just was always reading. So I never really let anything pile up. I've gotten rid of books over the years and now have gone back and gotten them back again.
Yes.
Hardcovers of things. I just read an incredible, there's a writer named Nick Tosches. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He wrote a book on Dean Martin called Dino. Incredible book. I mean, if you're into that, I mean, not everybody's into Dean Martin and Sinatra and all that stuff.
No, I've got the Sinatra book. I still need to read it, but
he's a great writer. He really brought this Dean Martin, explained in his writing what Dean Martin was, why he was different from Sinatra. Why Sinatra wanted to be Dean Martin. A really, really good book. I just finished reading that. I've read that probably my life, I don't know, 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
What else? I'm reading a book currently. I just got a book about Arnold Rothstein, who was he was in the Prohibition days. He was one of the main guys behind the advent of legal liquor in the country. New York guy, a professional gambler. Interesting book. But again, you have to be into the subject matter.
Well, yeah, and it's a whole other part of society that the average person has no clue that there's that. What do they call those? Like a sub. It's like what is it? Like a subculture. So there's
Well, the Prohibition days in the 20s and the Jazz Age in New York, and there's a great book I also read called Supreme City about Manhattan in the 20s in the Jazz Age and
that must have been crazy cool.
How New York. There's a subtitle. I can't read it right now, but it's about New York and how New York in the 20s set the tone for modern America with fashion and just really, really good history. But I'm into history. I just like reading about what happened years ago.
Right. Which then leads you to how you kind of view what's going on today.
Absolutely. Those who do not understand history are doomed to repeat it, they say. So, the history of the country in the last 100 years, 200 years is you just see the world change. Whereas before that, didn't change very much for 300-400 years prior. It was there was no progress. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of, the late 1800s and 1900s, the country started producing steel and just industry exploded and train lines and freight trains and laying tracks, and just insane how this country was put together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kids today, I don't think have any hunger for any of that. No, they could care less. They just
and we should talk about that on another one too, because you wonder from where that stems. That's what always gets me. I'm just like, okay, so from where does that come? Is it things going too fast? Is it things going, too much availability?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think it's going too fast, but I also think people don't know what to believe, that what is true anymore.
Right.
Disinformation, misinformation, AI. You look at a picture today, you go, is that real? You don't know.
Right.
So I don't think kids can read. There's a book called The People's History of the United States that is supposedly the true history of major events, Vietnam War, Columbus discovering America. And it's not pretty. It's a brutal history. But people look to that and go, well, that's not what we were taught in school. So people I think a lot of young kids don't know what to believe, if it's true or not. Or well, is it true because it was written in a book 100 years ago? Does that make it true? You can question these things for the rest of time.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to quality as well. I think, or quality and qualification. I think there's a lot of times where, we're maybe seeing it now. We've had 2 assassination attempts as of recently, and you're like, what is going on here? Are all these people qualified to be watching and doing this job? Do we have enough of them? Is there enough of them that are qualified to be doing this? Oftentimes, I work for the school district, so there's oftentimes you're like, okay, I saw this video, I did this quiz, but am I qualified to do all this stuff?
I don't think, I mean, the taking pride in learning a skill, is it's lost. It's like, everything's a shortcut. But all these questions really come down to, I mean, these are bigger discussions, but how much do you trust the government to be telling you the truth? So
right.
If you can wrap your head around all that, and most people don't want to wrap their head around it, they don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Right.
So, I've never been one to stick my head in the sand. I want to know what's going on, whether I can do something about it or not. I don't want to be a sap and a sucker. I want to know what's happening. I want the real deal story. And if I can't find it out from this person, I'll find it out from another source. And that's just me. I don't hide from it. I know I can't change a lot of the things that are out there, but I want to know. I don't want to go through life with blinders on.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I mean, everyone's different.
They are. And there's degrees. It's like temperatures. It's a culture temperature. You either are cold on this or hot on it. You just gotta, it's good to be somewhere in between in there where you're like, okay, I know about it. And a lot of times I think these days, if I don't know how many people, this is how I feel about it. I'm like, look, I don't care. Okay. That's maybe not the right way to go. It's a bigger concern to me that you tell me the truth. I get it in the end. If you're doing it for this reason, that's why you're doing it, but don't act like I don't see the reason that you're doing this. And
that's part of the propaganda, man. That's, they, don't admit.
They don't care.
Don't admit to it. Play dumb. That's just, we live in strange times, man.
Yeah, and I think they're
I'm going to be 64 years old this year, so I've seen a lot of things happen. I mean, over the years in this country, it's just, we're in strange times.
Yeah. What's your birthday?
December 16th, 1960.
All right. I hit the big 6-0 in November. So, yeah.
It is what it is. As long as you, feel good about yourself mentally, physically, just keep on keeping on, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I look forward to the next thing. Now, what's next for you then? It's just looking forward to what are you doing outside? And then I can we should roll it on up.
I mean, I'm pretty much, I live in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do a lot these days. I'm always writing and I'm always reading. So I can tell you what I'm writing. I just write and I don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't know. So, but I keep myself busy. There's living remotely. I'm off the grid. I've got solar and all that stuff. So
Nice.
there's always a lot of things to do around when you live off the grid property. I've got a water well, there's maintenance to do. There's always something to do.
True.
So I keep busy because you just can't call a plumber or whatever. It just doesn't. He's got to come from 2 hours away, and it costs you $1,000. So you learn to kind of do your own stuff. And that's what I do. I just kind of take it easy. I watch the ravens fly around, the crows, the eagles, and I do a lot of reading and writing. I'm always writing stuff, so that kind of my outlet.
It's a beautiful part of the country too. It's
it's it's very, I'm in New Mexico. Northern part of New Mexico, and it's very it's a very spiritual land over here. I don't know how to explain it. I've gone all over this country, and there's very few places that make you feel like this.
That's pretty cool.
You have to be at the right point in your life to appreciate it. If you would have put me here in 1985, I would have 10 minutes. So I'm where I want this. And it helps you reflect and, heal yourself. And, when there's nothing, there's nothing really to disturb me. The day is mine. I don't have to listen. It's complete silence outside most of the time.
That's beautiful.
But it's not for everybody. I have to drive an hour to the supermarket. So it's that kind of thing. Yeah. You do what you do, but either you want this or you don't. So for me, at this point in my life, it's great.
Yeah.
I like living away. Anybody comes down the road here, there's no reason for them to be coming down this road. So if they come down the road, it's usually not good. Not that ever happens, but I'm just saying there's no reason for anybody to come down my road. You get to a gate and then, so I don't see anybody unless I want to. No, I can go. I could go into town where the grocery store is in Santa Fe, and whatever. You're in the middle of malls and everything else. So, but I grew up in New York City, man. I've lived in LA. I've lived all over the place. I've traveled the country. I just want to be chill. At this point.
I was going to say you could say it's the polar opposite of both of those. It is. Being where you are is the polar opposite of both those places.
Oh, for sure. It's really, you walk, there's a little store down the road that's your little country type store. He's got beer and cigarettes and gasoline and propane and some food. I mean, there's a lot of farmers around here and guys walking in with, gun on their hip. I mean, this is what it is out here. You don't go down anybody's driveway or anybody's road if the gate is closed, especially because you'll get shot. So it's like the Wild West. So it's a better life.
It was in my head yesterday that I'm just like, is this what we're coming to? It's like it's as angry as everybody seems to get and as upset they seem to be over nothing. I'm like, is that what this is boiling down to? Is they want so many sides say whatever they want to this country should be, or you should be this to me, or I am this at you, or whatever. I'm like, holy shit. And then you're getting people shot right and left, and you're like, is this just turning out to be the wild, wild west here?
You control people by pitting them against each other. Then you can control them. So that's what this all is. It's my view is once you choose a side, you've lost already. It's like you can't choose any of it. You've just got to float above it all. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yep.
Whoever's supposed to be president, whether they get enough votes or not, they're going to be president because that's the way the world works now. So you just have to float above it and not care and protect your own. The government's not going to protect you. You got to protect yourself. So, it's why I live out here. It's like, if the shit goes down, I've got solar, I got a water well. I'm like, you come down my road and I don't know who you are. You're probably going to get shot at. So this is what goes on. So this is not for everybody, but
Right.
I was in New York City over 2012 with Hurricane Sandy, which people don't realize that was Katrina level, that hurricane. Half of Manhattan was underwater.
That's
So
crazy.
I got trapped in Manhattan Island for 8 days. The bridges were closed. The tunnels were filled with water. The subway tunnels were filled with water. You couldn't get off Manhattan Island. And I lived about 25 miles into Queens. I couldn't get there. At that point, I left New York in January of 2013, and I never went back. And I said to myself, if there's ever a natural disaster, I do not want to be in a city.
Right.
And it took me 10 years from that point to get here.
Wow.
Really. Well, let's see, 2013. It took me about, I got here a couple years ago. So it took me a while to get here, but I knew you don't want to be in a big city when there's a hurricane or whatever.
Right.
And that's why I'm here, man. I just, I'm happy to be, away from it all.
Yeah.
Again, most people they couldn't do this, what I do. They, and they're also like, you're crazy, whatever. Everything's fine. Okay. I don't try to convince anybody of anything.
Right. No reason to.
This is what I'm doing.
No reason.
Either you agree, or you don't. If you don't, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't sweat the small stuff anymore. I do what's best for me, and
and treat everybody is like I always say, it's not about how you are, what you do in your home, as long as everything is cool and you're not hurting anybody. But just don't act a twat. Don't go out and act a twat. I don't care who you're sleeping with, whatever you think you are, just don't act a twat. Just,
there's it's just everybody wants to get everything on, influencer on Instagram or whatever it might be, or Facebook. It's just,
and act like we don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's just crazy, man. I try not to pay too much attention. I don't really have any. I have a couple of streaming apps, but I don't have any cable TV. I don't watch the news. I mean, I check in to see what's happening, but I don't like, my ex-brother-in-law would have the news on from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to sleep, just playing constantly. It's just like, I can't listen to any of that, man. It's all nonsense anyway, most of it. So,
right.
These are things you learn from being on the road and being a crazy person for, you can't get here I couldn't get here without going through what I went through.
That's true.
What I went through made me who I am to get to this point. So
everything happens for a reason.
Exactly, man.
And everything happens when it should. That's my other one too.
Timing.
Yep. And and like you said, going with it when it happens, it helps us with regret. Not that I never have regret. Not that I'm never like, shit. But it allows you, if you can get your mind in that thought, you start opening your eyes to the things that happen when they do happen. And you can look back quickly and go, oh, yeah, okay, it was supposed to happen now. So I'm not going to go, I should have done that. Ugh.
Everything happens when it's supposed to. I'm a firm believer in that. The timing of things is what it's supposed to be. If you get a roadblock, it's because it's not supposed to happen at that time. It's not right. The timing's not right. So, you've got to just trust in the universe, man, and just roll with it. And I can speak this way at my age because I've been through a lot. So that's what makes it so clear for me how to maintain your body and your mind's health. It's don't think about too much and just live in the moment and be happy, and gratitude, man. Be grateful.
Be grateful.
For sure.
And be civil to everybody.
Be civil to everybody. You reap what you sow.
Yes. Yes. Gosh, I cannot wait till we do another one. And we got other things to talk about. That's going to be great.
Let me know, man. I appreciate you having me on. And
I appreciate your time, man. I'm sorry we ran a little over than normal, and but I'm glad it all is doing well. So
everything was great. I had a great time talking with you, and
fantastic.
I'm open for another one down the road.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. We'll do it soon. I can't wait. I will just say, what I'll do is we'll say a last thing here. Anything, last thing you want to say hello or to anybody?
If you want more to find out more about me or whatever, go to my Instagram account, 1985 Road Dog, 1985 Road Dog. That's all my photos of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s of me with all the bands and hanging out and blah, blah, blah. But there's a link on there for my link tree. If you click the link tree, you'll get a link to buy the book. You'll get a link to my YouTube channel. You'll get a link to a bunch of other stuff. So the best place to find more is on my Instagram, 1985 Road Dog.
And I put it up there in the chat so everybody can see that on Instagram.
Yep, that's the best place to find all my links, links to the book and my YouTube channel. And that's the best place to find all my stuff.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to do our theme track out. If you've got just a second, I'll talk to you right after that's over, and we'll say goodbye. And in the meantime, everybody, thank you for everybody who was here today. Thanks to everybody who's going to be watching this. Mostly great freaking time, man.
Thank you.
This is a great show, and I can't wait to have you back, and we'll talk about some more things. And all the best to you with this re-release, man. I think it's going to be great. There's some great extra content, people. So
I thank you, man. I anybody that's interested in it and actually purchases it, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. All right, guys, we will see you later. Thanks again. I will see you on Go Game Go soon. And I've got another lightning news flash going to be coming up, folks. Take it easy.